now, I'm going to bring on our Executive Director of Chacruna, Dr. Bia Labachi, to share a little bit more.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here again with you all. I'm also on the team Sacred Plants, Protect and Honor Sacred Plants, wearing our Chacruna t-shirt. And Chacruna is a public nonprofit. We just got our status as a 501c3, and we promote public education about psychedelic plant medicines, and we try to make academic knowledge more accessible. We also try to create a bridge, a dialogue between the world of shamanism, ritual, religion, tradition, indigenous people, the global south, the ceremony, and the emergent field of psychedelic science, and all the discussions around psychedelic-assisted therapy. Third objective of our nonprofit is to increase visibility of voices that normally are marginalized from mainstream psychedelic field, and we like to figure and give a platform and big spotlight into women, queer people, people of color, indigenous people, people from the global south. So it's, in this regard, it's a great honor to have today Yumiak. I had the pleasure to go to Colombia for the first time in 1997 and met Dr. Germán Zuluaga, who was at that time involved in the creation of Yumiak, who launched the first ethical guidelines for yajeceros, or indigenous medical doctors, shamans, on best practices and ethical discussions around plant medicine and shamanism and religion, raising the first issues that are now so strong and pressing among us, such as ethical boundaries with organizers and commercialization, commodification, ethical guidelines. And the Yumiak was a bit, had a few years being really intense, and then kind of lost a little bit track, and now it's on another wave of a really strong effort to become very visible. And we have had relationships with the Yumiak for many, many years, and more recently with Riccardo and Miguel and their team. And also they've been participating and supporting Chacruna, so they are friends, and we very much appreciate them. Miguel also traveled to Plantas Sagradas in Las Americas 1. Yumiak was so kind to send Miguel as a representative. They self-funded his participation in Mexico. That was a truly EPCO conference by the Lake Chapala, and that was where I first met Miguel. And I also know Riccardo for many years, brought him to different forums that I participate, invited to different conferences. So it's my great pleasure to be here today among friends, activists. Riccardo has many stories, a true Zapatista that lived a few years in Mexico. And also, of course, not to talk about Diana, who is a dear, I can express how much tenderness I have for her, a warrior, a mother, an activist, a person that has one foot in the world of the Sierras, the Huixarica Sierras in Mexico, and another one in the psychedelic field of the Bay Area. We have been collaborating for many years. And that's my introduction to you all. I urge you to visit our website, and also to join our upcoming Sacred Plants in the Americas conference, which is a continuation to our previous conference. This conference that I mentioned that was truly EPCO had 25 indigenous representatives from all across the Americas, speaking often in their own languages. The conference was entirely free. The conference was entirely in Spanish. And the conference was by cardinal point of the Huixarica people in the Lake Chapala, very magical, very blessed. I have fond memories, and we're doing an online continuation next April, where we're also going to launch our Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative project. So more about that later. And with this, I pass the word to Diana, and I just want to give a big special thanks to Josh and to all the wonderful Chacruna team and the new Chacruna team members, and thank you all for your continued support.
Riccardo, you're live.
Oh, perfect. Okay, well, first of all, good afternoon, one and all. Thank you very much for having us again, for inviting us. Josh, Kiana, Bialabaci, thank you for the lovely presentation. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you again. I'll cut right down to the chase. Today, Miguel and I were making a specific argument. I will talk briefly of what we think it's a necessary framework that must be used and adopted when agencies, international cooperation, philanthropies, governments, development operators, businesses, NGOs approach and work with indigenous communities in the context where UMIAC operates. And I would generalize it, I would say, all of Colombia, although we do think that perhaps the framework that we're going to be presenting today should perhaps be somehow applied to indigenous communities everywhere, at least in the continent. Yeah. And so I'm going to walk you through an argument, to a presentation, hopefully making our point, my case. And then there will be a little bit of time for questions. And Miguel will give some really important and pertinent look of how we're witnessing and experiencing the conflict from within the region. So the title of the presentation is Transcending Armed Conflict, Transitional Justice and Indigenous People in Colombia. Next, please. Okay. Josh? Hello.
You're back. We're experiencing some technical difficulties, but you're back on now.
Okay, great. Okay. I think we should go to the previous slide. So slide number 2 we need. This is number 3. Okay. We're not going to be able, of course, to describe and talk and give a critical outlook of the Colombian conflict, but we're going to give just some basic important facts, okay? In a context of enormous disparities, in a context where peasant communities, rural movements demanded agrarian reform, in 1964, the FARC guerrilla was formed, okay? It slowly grew in southwestern Colombia. Then in the 1990s, we see the emergence of paramilitary groups. No, okay, yeah, please. We see the emergence of paramilitary groups which were created to protect land-owning farms from guerrilla and from peasant movement. Okay, in 1997, there is a unification of paramilitary groups around the country with the United Self-Defense Group of Colombia. Okay, that's quite important. Then in 2002, it's a landmark event. Between 2002 and 2010, President Uribe was elected, and that also marks a peak of paramilitary violence, massacres, and ignites a tremendous phenomena that connotates Colombia since the late 1990s up to the present, which is a really, really high number of internally displaced people. Okay, it's important to notice that in 2000, Colombia, the Plan Colombia was signed with the US, and Colombia became the third largest recipient of US aid in the world. Okay, originally Plan Colombia was just aimed at the war on drugs, but in 2002, the US Congress loosened restrictions, and then the war on drugs actually merged with counterinsurgency operations. Within that context, we can talk of an IDP, internally displaced people crisis, with almost 8 million registered IDPs. And it's important to notice that from 2015 and 2018, Colombia was the first country in the world for internally displaced people. Generally ranks between the second, the third, or the fourth, depending of the year, in terms of IDPs in the world. I think that currently we're number 2 behind Syria, unfortunately. In terms of registered victims of the armed conflict, a population of approximately 60 million, we have between 8, 9, and 10 million, depending on the source, of registered victims. The government agency, Victims Unit, gives a figure of 9 million war victims. In November 2016, landmark event, again, there is a signing of a peace accord between the FARC guerrilla and the government. Okay. Currently, the situation, we haven't seen a de-escalation of violence overall, but we do see the humanitarian crisis ongoing. It hasn't receded. Okay. Next slide, please. Slide. Okay, the current situation in 2020, that's important. Well, we've seen a surge of violent events in the last couple of years since the installing of the new right-wing government. That, of course, implies as well violations of international humanitarian law, which partly derives from the Geneva Conventions of 1947. So we're talking about landmine accidents, sexual violence, forced recruitment, killings of former combatants, human rights defenders, social leaders. Mainly we're talking about land claimants and promoters of illicit crop substitution programs, which were agreed upon in the peace accords. Specifically for indigenous communities, what we are recording is forced confinement, meaning that people cannot leave their dwellings, their communities, because the armed groups that control the area forbid them from doing so. Killing of leaders, loss of land, loss of knowledge and identity, disappearances of culture. At present, since January 2020, 72 massacres have been registered in Colombia, only in the current year. 72 massacres. That's a total of, depending on the source again. I'm sticking with governmental or just large NGO in terms of sources. So IDP, which is a local think tank, gives a figure of 285 people, leaders, social leaders, rural leaders, indigenous leaders, Afro-Colombian leaders killed since the beginning of the year. Next, please. So we're describing a humanitarian crisis, a very difficult situation where vulnerability of rural community is highly enhanced by the dynamic in the terrain. And now we're going to introduce something very important, a way of looking at Colombia and the Colombian conflict, and a tool, judicial tool, that we believe is fundamental and must be adopted by whoever interacts with rural and indigenous communities in this country. So in 2004, the Constitutional Court comes up with sentence T025, which is a landmark transitional justice sentence regarding public policies IDPs, victims of conflict, and communities that are at risk of displacement. Okay, this is a very, very important sentence from which derive a series of orders that the Constitutional Court emits for the state, to the state, and now I will tell you what we're talking about. Okay, the sentence addresses a humanitarian crisis in what they called an unconstitutional state of affairs, okay, regarding the protection of the rights of IDPs, internally displaced people, or people at risk of becoming IDPs. We're talking about 8 million people. There are 9 million registered victims in Colombia. So basically, most of the victims of the Colombian conflicts are either displaced or at risk of displacement. The sentence, interestingly, was prompted by an avalanche of lawsuits against the state from victims groups, indigenous organizations, and peasants organizations, and human rights lawyers. Very, very important that within the framework of the sentence, we understand that adopting a differential focus becomes a key element in public policy. And I'll explain what I mean soon. Another important piece of legislation that we're not going to discuss today, but it's very important, it's Law 1448 of 2011, and that's a victims law restitution, victims and land restitution law, and has to do with protection, assistance, and reparation for victims of war in this country. Next, please. Okay, thank you. So briefly on differential focus, okay. T025, the sentence, is followed by a series of orders to the state or resolutions, yeah, that have to do with understanding the difference between segments of the population, how different sectors in Colombia, demographies, are experiencing their vulnerability, okay? And one of the biggest mistakes in public policy is to consider victims as an homogeneous demography. The sentence differentiates amongst at least 10 different communities. I'm going to point out 3 main segments of the population. Resolution 092, 2008, women, how women are experiencing the Colombian conflict. Resolution 005, 2009, Afro-descendant communities. And Resolution 004, which is pertinent to the talk today, which is for indigenous people. Okay, so we have 3 different focus, 3 different emphases, yeah, main emphasis. And then, of course, the follow-up resolutions include gender, LGBTIQ communities, people with disabilities, children, elderly, and so on and so forth. But these 3 broad categories are very, very important. And when we talk about human rights, access to rights, and public policy in this country, in Colombia. Next, please. Okay. And now this brings us to the reason for such a alarmist, but unfortunately realistic title. Resolution 004 of 2009 states the following, okay? Of the 102 indigenous peoples in Colombia, 34 have been declared at risk of cultural and physical extermination. I want to make a slight brief parenthesis. The sentence wasn't cast upon indigenous communities. The sentence was created hand in hand with indigenous organizations, human rights lawyers, indigenous lawyers, indigenous MPs, and rural organizations. So there was a huge amount of work done previous to the sentence that enabled the court to create a list of communities in actually peoples at risk of physical and cultural extermination. So this is a very, very important framework and tool when you approach indigenous communities in Colombia. What are we talking about? Military activities by legally and illegally armed groups, occupation of sacred and ancient sites, anti-personnel landmines, forced recruitment, not only voluntary recruitment as well into the armed forces, and illegal armed groups, assassinations of leaders, we mentioned that before, confinement, sexual violence. Unfortunately, we witnessed 2 very serious cases in the current year. In one instance, an Embera Chami girl was sequestered, kidnapped, and detained by a group of soldiers in a school for 3 days and raped. Land grabbing, and then, of course, the war on drugs, fumigations with glyphosate, and economic activities in indigenous lands, mining, monocultures, hydrocarbon, but not only, all type of economic activities. Those are some of the factors that Resolution 004, which derives from sentence 0T25, underlines in order to back up the concept that 34 of the 102 indigenous communities in Colombia are at risk of physical and cultural extermination. Next, please. Okay, so what does the Constitutional Court actually orders with Resolution 004? The resolution calls for designing and implementing ethnic safety plans for each one of the indigenous peoples at risk, okay? The identification of harmful systemic dynamics, which in a way they already did with the sentence, and then to find solutions and implement or modify public policies to revert the extermination process. And now it's probably not very clear, at least it's not on my screen, but next you see a picture that I got from the sentence of the list of the 34 people at risk of physical and cultural extermination. And then I underlined the Coreguaje people, Cofan people, Siona people. Next, please. Okay. Inga people and Kamsa. Why I underline these specific nations? Because Umiyak is composed of mainly 5 indigenous people, so all the 5 indigenous people, the spiritual authorities that make up this large network that Umiyak is, belong to peoples that are experiencing a process of cultural and physical extermination. And that's very, very important, because when you understand this framework, you would understand how Umiyak operates in the terrain and what motivates all the activities, programs, and projects that we try to implement with our communities. Next, please. So what to do? That we have a very innovative, we think, important, groundbreaking even, perhaps even an example to the rest of the world, framework of transitional justice. And where does this go? I mean, who needs to listen? Everyone. International NGOs, governments, businesses, ayahuasca entrepreneurs, it's a phenomenon, conservation and environmental agencies, support groups, philanthropists, founders of all sorts of programs. And then the picture that you see to the left, that is the ethnic safety plan for the Inga people. Each safety plan, it's actually comprised of many, many pages, and was created through a long process which lasted more than a year, in which communities with government officials identified serious threats. Okay, so each one of the 34 people at risk of extermination has developed and realized a ethnic safety plan. Next, please. So that's important to understand as agencies, supporters, businesses, when you approach and try to work with these communities. Something that I want to point out that it's important to notice that the ethnic safety plan are based on another very important strategic tool, which most indigenous communities, 102 is the number, in Colombia, peoples in Colombia have, which are called the life plans. Okay, life plans are the past, the present, and the future. Our community saw themselves. What do they remember? What's the historical memory, even ancestral memory? What are we living right now? And where do we want to be years from now? Yeah. And it's very, very important and revealing for operators when you look at the life plans, because it really does give you a direction on how to move and how to interact with the territories, authorities. So it's very, very important if you approach communities, peoples in Colombia, to be aware of this framework. Yeah, ethnic safety plans and life plan. And so the call that we're making is every intervention, yeah, from the smallest to the largest, should operate within the framework of transitional justice. Next, please. Okay, thank you. So now I briefly name some essential transitional justice tools, okay? Justice tools. The safety plans, the life plans, I think all 102 peoples in Colombia have a life plan. ILO Resolution 169, which is the world document for the rights of indigenous people, which in Colombia has been absorbed, incorporated almost in its totality in the 1991 Constitution. So that's very, very important. So you, as an operator, look at ILO 169 and consider, and taking that's been incorporated into the Colombian Constitution. And then, of course, the 2007 UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, which very often overlaps with ILO 169. Okay. And then I put an asterisk at the bottom because there is a transversal process that always needs to be implemented, whatever you do and whenever you intervene, if that's a proper word, in indigenous communities, which is previous consultation. It's a process. It's a process of reaching agreements and consensus with authorities regarding whatever methodology, approach, program you want to implement. And to the right, this is just an example of how communities, COFAN, I believe, organized their own, the creation of the life plan, the realization of the life plan. This process, the life plans, lasted years. I personally witnessed more than one. Okay, next, because I'm running short of time. Really quick, and I'm going to conclude. So what do we propose? Okay, there is a methodology that we would like people to use. It's a methodology that it was fashionable between international cooperation, agencies, development, and emergency for many years. It's still there. It basically says that whoever intervenes in a war zone, in a conflict area, is going to face dividers and connectors. And each action either divides or connects. So the implications are complex. And I urge everyone who wants to work with communities to look up do no harm methodologies and apply them. And perhaps in the next community forum, we can talk more about these tools, life plans, do no harm, and safety plans. Next, please. And I think it's the last one. Okay, an example, shocking example, I would say, of, or maybe not that shocking, perhaps, of an ethnic safety plan. This is an extract from the COFAN People Life Plan. And I think some of you here know the COFAN. You know, they're great repositories of ayahuasca culture. They have amazing elders still working and relieving communities with their knowledge. Okay, the COFAN people included, you can see it in the slide, it's right above, WWF and Amazon Conservation thing as threats and dividers, in their territories. Why Amazon Conservation thing and WWF are considered threats to the Cofam people. They created the organization ASMIC, for example, which in the life plan has been defined as a divisive or divisive instrument. And then the constitution of a national park called Indiande, which they believe goes against the conception of conservation and protection of the territory that indigenous people have. Historically, indigenous people in Colombia have been against national parks, but that's another story. So thank you very much. This is what I had to present today, and this is the argument. Transitional justice, do no harm. And now Miguel is going to hopefully give us some more interesting information from the territory.
Greetings. I want to just introduce myself. My name is Diana Negrín da Silva. I will be translating for Miguel Evanjuanoy Chindoy. This is the second time I've had the pleasure to listen to this very interesting project that UMIAC has been pushing. Similarly, this is the second time I've had the chance to translate for Riccardo Vitale and Miguel Evanjuanoy. So I'll do my best, but I think that this is a very important conversation. Just to summarize and kind of segue into Miguel, you know, the question of all of these different actors, the presence of so many different types of formal and informal institutions in indigenous communities, and the types of responses that need to be made in order for a notion like doing no harm to actually take a firm footing. Muchas gracias, Miguel. Voy a estar traduciendo de poquito en poquito. Y bueno, adelante, por favor.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Diana.
Sí.
Pues, en primer lugar, agradecer a la organización Chacruna, en especial a Vía, por esta invitación, por abrir este espacio a nuestra organización Lomillar, y también a Diana y no me acuerdo el nombre del otro compañero que está también miembro de la organización Chacruna. A todos muchas gracias. Pues, en primer lugar también quiero dar agradecimiento a la luz divina, a nuestros abuelos, abuelas, sabedoras, por para pedirle primero que todo la licencia a todos nuestros ancestros, a nuestros hermanos que están en nuestros territorios cuidando las selvas amazónicas. Pedirle permiso a la Madre Tierra para compartir la palabra con todos los que están en este momento conectados. Pues ya me presentaron, soy de acá, de Miguel Evanjuanoy. Primero que todo, soy miembro del pueblo Inga de Colombia. Pertenezco a un territorio sagrado, territorio ancestral, resguardo Inga de Yunguillo.
A ver, adelante, sí. So, first of all, Miguel would like to thank Chacruna, Via Labachi, for the invitation and the space for UMIAC. And secondly, Miguel would like to thank the Divine Root, the elders, the grandparents, our ancestors, brothers and sisters who are caring for the territory in the Amazon, and for permission from Mother Earth to be able to share these words. Miguel is from the Inga people of Colombia, sacred and ancestral territory.
Muchas gracias. Pues en este momento voy a compartir la palabra sobre la importancia de las culturas milenarias de acá del Amazonas. Primero, pues verdaderamente quiero mandar la solidaridad a todos los pueblos por todo lo que está aconteciendo en este momento a nivel de los pueblos y a nivel del mundo entero con el tema del COVID-19.
So first he wanted to share the importance of ancestral cultures in the Amazon and a message of solidarity to all peoples who have been suffering because of the pandemic of COVID.
Sí, es muy importante para nosotros pues compartir la palabra, compartir ese sentimiento que tenemos los pueblos amazónicos por todo lo que está pasando en los territorios. En este momento pues es muy preocupante vivir en medio del fuego cruzado, vivir en medio de una amenaza, vivir en un exterminio físico y cultural, los pueblos guardianes de la selva amazónica.
So the first thing is that it's very important to share words and sentiments regarding all that is affecting indigenous territories right now, and in particular in the Amazon, and what it actually means to live in the midst of occupation, in the midst of threats, and in the midst of cultural and physical extermination.
La riqueza del Amazonas, la riqueza cultural, la riqueza espiritual, la riqueza de las plantas sagradas, las plantas maestras, en este momento están amenazadas.
The wealth of the cultures, of the territories, of the ecologies and spiritualities of this land, including these medicines and plants, these sacred medicines and plants, are currently under threat of extermination.
Venimos ya con esa preocupación, ya llevamos más de 500 años, sigo puntualizando, señalando, digamos, de que ya llevamos más de 500 años que vivimos en esa lucha, en esa resistencia, los pueblos a toda forma de exterminio.
And this is something that we have been concerned with for 500 years. Living this struggle and living this resistance against cultural and physical extermination has been a concern for all of these years.
El extractivismo, el sistema capitalista, la política extractivista de los gobiernos quieren acabar con la Amazonía, quieren apagar, quieren silenciar la voz, a la voz, digamos, a la vida de toda la humanidad, que es el pulmón del mundo. Estamos muy, muy preocupados. Los gobiernos, somos olvidados prácticamente de los gobiernos. Y así como nos tienen olvidados, quieren acabar con los territorios sagrados de la Amazonía.
So extraction, capitalism, and specifically extractivist policies have been seeking to silence the voices and the life of those who are living in these territories. This is humankind, the world's lungs, and Miguel is noting that they are forgotten by the government in this moment of being extracted, in this way in which this territory is being intervened.
La extracción de hidrocarburos, el acaparamiento de tierras, que es la frontera agrícola, la expansión ganadera, el turismo, el boom del turismo, todas esas formas que ha llegado, digamos, a la Amazonía, quiere especialmente apagar con esa vida de toda la humanidad.
So fossil fuels, the concentration of land through agro-industry and cattle, and this new boom in tourism, these are all forms of extraction that are affecting the Amazon.
A los pueblos indígenas, los gobiernos no nos escuchan. Hay muchas preocupaciones y en esas preocupaciones están nuestras plantas medicinales, las plantas maestras que a diario nos guían para la pervivencia de los pueblos.
And the government isn't listening to these preoccupations. And at the center of this is this preoccupation for the protection of these sacred plants, these teacher plants that are likewise under threat.
vemos con tristeza cómo las plantas maestras se nos van saliendo de nuestros territorios. Se van de nuestros territorios y son usadas o mal usadas por personas que no tienen ese conocimiento de nuestras plantas medicinales.
We see with sadness how our teacher plants are leaving the territory and being used or misused in ways that do not show the knowledge behind those teacher plants.
Ahora quiero puntualizar más que todo en el tema de la planta sagrada, el yagé.
And now he wants to take specific note of the teacher plant known as yagé.
O ayahuasca, como,
Right.
como lo queramos llamar en los diferentes pueblos amazónicos. En este momento nos ha preocupado también la apropiación cultural de las personas ajenas de nuestro territorio y de las organizaciones que siguen con esa investigación, que siguen prácticamente es muy preocupante que a la planta sagrada quieran medicalizar, quieran convertirlo en una industria. Entonces, para nosotros esas cosas son muy, muy, muy preocupantes como pueblos que luchamos a diario para la defensa de nuestros territorios, para la vida del Amazonas.
So at this time in particular, the level of cultural appropriation that is being conducted by outsiders, people who are foreign to their indigenous territories, organizations that come in researching and wanting to medicalize this plant and create an industry around this plant. This is something that is very preoccupying for a people that has been struggling to protect their territory.
Nos preocupa es que las personas ajenas a nuestro territorio verdaderamente estén vulnerando nuestros derechos que los pueblos indígenas tenemos. Según el convenio de la diversidad biológica, también nos habla de que las plantas medicinales son sagradas y colectivas de los pueblos indígenas, son de propiedad colectiva, pero así las organizaciones o la ciencia, digamos, sigue investigando a nuestras plantas medicinales y eso nos pone, digamos, en una situación muy riesgosa para los pueblos amazónicos.
So in particular, our rights are being affected by foreigners, according to the Convention on Sacred Plants, where these particular plants that are of collective knowledge are being seen more as a form of property, where scientific study is coming in and starting to shift those understandings around collective ownership. And this is something that is quite concerning for the communities.
No solamente ahora, hablando del yagé, han querido patentarla, pero hay otras plantas que han sido patentadas del Amazonas. No solamente hablo de acá de Colombia, sino a nivel de los 9 países que pertenecemos al Amazonas, a la cuenca amazónica. Han patentado y nosotros simplemente, los pueblos indígenas, hemos sido objetos para las organizaciones o personas que solamente quieren lucrarse de dinero y empobrecer más a los pueblos indígenas. Y eso hemos venido viendo desde que prácticamente el sistema capitalista ha venido generando prácticamente daños en los territorios sagrados que nosotros lo único que miramos es verdaderamente proteger la vida de las selvas amazónicas para el bien de toda la humanidad.
So, in particular, this interest in patenting yagé is of concern because other plants have been patented in this Amazonian region. And in this way, indigenous people have been seen as objects by those individuals and organizations who are interested in seeking a profit from these collective natural resources, which actually winds up impoverishing these same indigenous communities. And so the capitalist system has very much damaged our territories.
Y eso es lo más preocupante para nosotros, los pueblos amazónicos, ver cómo se ha alterado prácticamente ese conocimiento de los pueblos, hablando de la espiritualidad, esa ciencia que los pueblos milenariamente hemos venido practicando y en este momento se ha visto que pues se ha generado diferentes interrogaciones frente también a las malas prácticas que mucha gente lo está haciendo con estas plantas maestras.
So, in particular, to see how our ancestral spiritual wisdom has been getting modified or reshaped with these new interrogations that have emerged through the misuses of these ancestral medicines.
Nosotros siempre hablamos del respeto hacia las plantas sagradas, hacia las plantas maestras, hacia las plantas medicinales de nuestros pueblos amazónicos. Pero en este momento hay mucha gente que no respeta. Entonces, asimismo, hay personas que solamente quieren mercantilizar, comercializar y convertirlo como en un negocio a nuestras plantas medicinales. Solamente quieren generar ganancias, pero ese no es el verdadero camino de las plantas maestras de los pueblos.
So we speak always of the need to respect sacred and medicinal plants, but many people from the outside do not share the same respect for these plants. And this is seen in the way in which they commodify and commercialize these medicinal plants, making them into a business, which is not the right path to be taken with these teacher plants.
Los pueblos que milenariamente hemos practicado la medicina, las medicinas sagradas, sabemos para qué se debe usar estas plantas medicinales. Esto no se puede prácticamente llevarlo, digamos, yo siempre lo digo, a que una planta sagrada sea criminalizada, penalizada o prostituida por esas malas prácticas. Nosotros sabemos que estas plantas son sagradas y sabemos el uso que se debe dar en los territorios.
So, as a people who have used these plants since time immemorial, we understand the uses and the practices that these very plants have. And we see that issues around criminalization and the prostitution and misuse of these plants is very much an opposite route from what indigenous peoples who have used these plants since time immemorial have used them for.
Para nosotros los pueblos amazónicos, las plantas son el alimento sagrado, es la esencia de un territorio, especialmente nosotros usamos para sanar el territorio, para sanar la colectividad, el individuo. Y igualmente es la guía que nos prácticamente hasta el momento nos tiene con vida en esa lucha, en esa resistencia frente a los diferentes estrategias del gobierno que nos quiere acabar con los pueblos guardianes de las selvas amazónicas.
For Amazonian people, these plants are a sacred food. They are a way to heal the territory. They are a way to heal the individual. And these plants are their guide in the struggle to resist these various forms of threats of governmental persecution.
Y hablando de la apropiación cultural, hemos visto también mucha gente foránea, siempre lo decimos así, que vienen a los territorios, o organizaciones también que vienen a nuestros territorios organizaciones camufladas de verdes que solamente llegan a los territorios con la finalidad de invadir, de investigar, de extraer algo de nuestra riqueza que tenemos. Y para nosotros, pues también hemos visto algunas organizaciones llegan a los territorios hablando de la reciprocidad, pero en esa reciprocidad no hay transparencia, no hay honestidad, y en esa reciprocidad hay intereses que ocultas, digamos, que nos ponen en riesgo.
So with regard specifically to cultural appropriation, many outside individuals and organizations, many of which camouflage themselves as green, are going into these communities, are conducting research, and are looking to extract from the territory. Furthermore, Miguel notes that many of these organizations use the language of reciprocity without there being any transparency to the work that they're doing, and to the way in which they actually may be undermining these communities rather than acting in a reciprocal way.
Y mucha gente llega, digamos, a los territorios también con la finalidad de aprender a ver qué tenemos en nuestros territorios. Y asimismo, dicen que ya saben, salen de nuestros territorios y ya quieren prácticamente parecer como indígenas, pero prácticamente ellos no saben nada. Yo siempre sé decir, llevo varios años en este proceso de la espiritualidad, pero yo no sé nada, solo estoy aprendiendo a vivir la vida, porque el conocimiento de la medicina o de la espiritualidad es de un territorio, y ese conocimiento no es digamos, no tiene que salir de un territorio, tiene que estar en un territorio, es para la colectividad. Allá es el servicio que debe prestar, digamos, también los médicos tradicionales o los taitas, como lo llamamos nosotros. Entonces, ahora en este momento mucha gente que salen de los territorios, o también jóvenes, hay jóvenes indígenas también han seguido ese camino, digamos, a la gente foránea que no son de nuestros territorios, han seguido, digamos, tras de ellos, buscando oportunidades con la medicina.
Mm-hmm. So many come to learn, right, as well, to learn in the territory and to see what they can learn from the plants in this territory. And then they leave and they begin to act or front as if they themselves were indigenous people with knowledge when they know very little. And this is from a perspective of somebody who is in the territory, living the life and allowing both the medicine and the spiritual knowledge to be anchored to the territory, which is for the collective good. That is something that's in keeping with the taitas or the traditional doctors. Similarly, there are young people from the communities who follow this path with foreigners and likewise create these ideas of promoting something that is not tied to the territory. And one of the things that Miguel is really emphasizing here is what happens when this knowledge, when these plants are taken out, abstracted from the territory, which is really where the combination of both the plants knowledge and the spiritual knowledge come together and take life.
Entonces, cuando salen de nuestros territorios, van a las grandes ciudades y empiezan a hacer publicidades que son taitas, que son reconocidos, pero nosotros no conocemos a esas personas. Solo están poniendo en riesgo la vida de los pacientes y exponiendo también ellos mismos, porque el tema de la espiritualidad es muy sagrado para nosotros. Entonces, es de mucho cuidado. Eso es de mucho respeto para los pueblos indígenas que verdaderamente practicamos la medicina sagrada del yagé.
Mm-hmm. So when these young indigenous individuals leave the territory and go to the cities and start to promote themselves as taitas or as some form of medicine men, they are not only putting at risk the health of their clients, but they are also exposing themselves because they are interacting with something that is sacred, that is spiritual, and therefore there is this lack of respect that has implications. Ya mero tenemos que terminar.
Sí. Y entonces todas estas formas de extracción de nuestro territorio nos trae debilidades, divisiones al interior de las comunidades. Entonces, como pueblos hermanos, pueblos indígenas, entre todos tenemos que unirnos para defender a las selvas amazónicas y a las culturas, a las plantas que son nuestro alimento sagrado. Entonces es el llamado a toda la humanidad. Nosotros, en medio de los conflictos que nos ha tocado vivir desde nuestros territorios, seguimos buscando, anhelando y soñando que algún día verdaderamente podamos vivir en paz y en armonía con la Madre Tierra.
So these forms of extraction are generating community divisions. And it's very important for there to be unity amongst communities in order for there to be a defense of the territory, of the culture, and of these sacred plants, which are nourishment. And because there are people who have lived conflicts throughout history, they deeply desire and seek and dream for a moment in which they can live in peace and harmony with this territory again.
Desde los territorios amazónicos, como pueblos unidos, estamos buscando y nos estamos curándonos a través de la espiritualidad, de toda esa guerra que nos ha tocado vivir, de toda esa división que nos ha dejado la guerra, enfermedades que la guerra ha dejado, pero gracias a las plantas maestras, a nuestros abuelos, abuelas, a través de las brigadas de salud espiritual, estamos buscando sanar esas heridas que el conflicto nos ha dejado en los territorios. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Very important final piece to this presentation is that from the Amazon territories and as a unified people that really is taking from this spiritual wealth, they see that the war that they have lived through, the divisions that that war created, and the illnesses that came from this war can be healed through the work of elders, of the taitas, of these plants, of the health brigades. And that is the message that he brings. Thank you. So, muchas gracias, Miguel. Creo que podremos hablar un poco más ahora con las preguntas y respuestas. Thank you so much, Miguel. We have moved now to the period of question and answer. And so far, it looks like there are a few if you go to the ask a question part. So I'm going to start with the first one. How might we work with indigenous groups to provide financial and economic resources while amplifying the power of Mother Ayahuasca? Entonces, la primera pregunta es, ¿cómo podemos trabajar con pueblos indígenas para dar el apoyo económico para ampliar el poder de nuestra Madre Ayahuasca? Entonces voy a repetir la pregunta. Tiene que ver con pues esta idea de alguien de fuera que quiera apoyar económicamente para ampliar esta idea de nuestra Madre Ayahuasca. Riccardo, Miguel.
Adelante, Miguel.
Pues no, muchas gracias por la pregunta. No, gracias también a la persona que esté interesada en conocer más, digamos, de nuestros proyectos de la organización, la Unión de Médicos Indígenas y Yaceros de la Amazonía Colombiana. Nosotros siempre trabajamos como pueblos indígenas en colectividad. Entonces, la organización comprende 5 pueblos indígenas amazónicos. Y en los 5 pueblos indígenas amazónicos nosotros hemos venido articulando proyectos de fortalecimiento cultural en los diferentes territorios que han sido pisoteados, como lo llamaríamos, por la violencia, por el conflicto armado. Y en ese mismo también, pues no sé, aquí son diferentes proyectos que estamos trabajando en el tema de los conocimientos de las mujeres sabedoras, fortalecimiento de esos procesos que son muy importantes para nosotros en el tema de la salud propia. También está el tema de las mujeres que han vivido el conflicto armado y que se han quedado con esas traumas, con esas enfermedades. Entonces, a través de nuestros abuelas sabias, estamos buscando esa sanación. Otros proyectos que también estamos llevando es, en este momento, estamos implementando el apoyo, digamos, en los territorios de parte de nuestros abuelos, taitas y abuelas sabedoras, para que desde sus territorios estén brindando el apoyo espiritual en el tema de sanación de las y los comuneros de sus territorios.
So first he wanted to...
No sé, Riccardo.
Oh. ¿Me dejas traducir? Can I translate this piece real fast, Riccardo? And then, yeah. So Miguel wanted to thank the question and thank the individual who asked the question and for their interest. One thing he wants to say is that as indigenous peoples, they work in collectivity. It is 5 Amazonian tribes. And what they're trying to do is articulate a cultural strengthening through community projects and in communities that have been deeply hurt by the violence of the conflict. So there's various different projects that they work on. One has to do with women healers. Another one has to do with helping heal women who experience the trauma of the conflict. And then, you know, largely also working with the taitas, with the elders who hold the spiritual knowledge in order to help with this process of healing from the traumas of the armed conflict. Riccardo, sorry. No.
Yeah, that would really thank you so much for actually all the questions I just finished reading, and thank you so much for this question. It's very, very important. I think this is, I believe, the essence of UMIAC's work within the framework of transitional justice, but more than that, beyond that, within the framework of this amazing conscience that indigenous communities and spiritual leaders are donating, are gifting the world with. We're carrying on with what I think, and perhaps I'm not an expert in conflict, but I've been working in conflict for over 20 years. With what I think is one of the most innovative, interesting, spiritual approach to reconciliation and peace building. Because we're talking about communities that are being torn apart by forced recruitment, conflict, extractive economy, losing of lands, communities that have produced victims, but also victimizers. Mm-hmm. So through Yahé and spirituality, and let me say as well, also through the programs of strengthening that UMIACS carries on, what is actually happening, it's a really important capillary exercise of reconciliation and peace building. Transcendence of trauma and repairing of the social fabric. In terms of our programs, we see that in a technique that we've been implementing, that UMIAC has been implementing since its incipience in the early 90s, but that was something that was already occurring in communities. UMIAC didn't invent it, of course, which is the spiritual health brigades. This is an interesting name to describe taitas going to different communities and solve problems. get people together, yeah, alleviate suffering. And that's very, very important. And then, of course, the program that Miguel mentioned, I think it's very, very important. In the last few years, we've been weaving relationships with women's group, victims of conflicts, offering access to Yahe ceremonies so that people can find again an internal harmony, peace, strengthen their lives and resolve, and then carry on with what they want to carry on, which is peace building in Colombia. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. There's another question. I'll read it first in English and then in Spanish. This is from Nanea Renteria. What is the most respectful way for non-indigenous peoples to interact with ayahuasca or yagé and the peoples that steward it? Entonces, la otra pregunta es, ¿cuál es la forma más respetuosa en la que las personas no indígenas pueden interactuar con ayahuasca o yagé y los pueblos que albergan esa medicina? Entonces, ¿cuál es la forma más respetuosa para que las personas no indígenas interactúen con esta medicina y con los pueblos que cuidan estas medicinas? ¿Quién se anima? Who wants to answer that one? No se escucha, Miguel.
¿Ahí sí me escuchas?
Sí.
Pues pienso que para nosotros es muy importante, primero que todo, respetar a los pueblos practicantes y dueños de las plantas sagradas de la medicina del yagé. Porque lo primero, como veníamos diciendo, siempre hemos venido diciendo desde las malocas, desde las ceremonias compartidas con nuestros abuelos sabios, que la medicina del yagé es prácticamente, eso es de un territorio, de un pueblo, de la colectividad. Y la medicina del yagé, primero que todo, no es para mercantilizar, para comercializar, ni para generar negocios. Y no, para eso no es. La medicina del yagé es para apoyar, colaborar, sanar de las enfermedades que las personas padecen, pero en ningún momento generar negocios, porque eso es como prácticamente, yo diría, como una maldición, porque si nosotros la convertimos en malas prácticas a lo sagrado, pues por eso estamos en donde estamos, por eso vivimos en un mundo prácticamente totalmente perdido, donde el hombre prácticamente no escucha, ya no escucha las orientaciones, ya el hombre ha perdido, digamos, esa confianza de sí mismo, de respetar, el respeto que se debe tener a las plantas maestras. Entonces, lo primero para nosotros sería eso, y mirar y tener mucha responsabilidad. Yo digo eso a partir de nuestros abuelos. Solo yo pienso que esa pregunta me lo han hecho anteriormente, y escuchando a los abuelos lo que ellos dicen, pues muy difícil de decir todo el mundo puede practicar la medicina del yagé. Pues lo harían, pero sin el conocimiento, sin esa espiritualidad. Y lo que van a buscar con el tiempo no es sanación, sino más enfermedad, porque estamos hablando de una planta sagrada, de una planta espiritual. Entonces, yo pienso que se debe tener es mucho respeto a los médicos tradicionales, a los verdaderos sabios.
Muchas gracias. Muy buena respuesta. So I'll do my best at answering this question. So specifically with respect to practicing communities, there's a few different answers that Miguel has. First is that from the malocas and the ceremonies that use yaje, it is something that is really rooted in the territory, that is rooted in a collectivity of traditional peoples and knowledges. It is definitely not meant to create a business opportunity for people. It is not. It is meant to support and to heal illnesses, and it is not meant to generate business for individuals. Secondly, if we malpractice something that is sacred, then we end up with the world that we have in front of us, right? Where men and women do not listen and are not able to receive orientation, losing confidence in the self and respect for the plants. So thirdly, it is a great responsibility. And Miguel mentions that he's been asked this question many times before, and it is really something that is tough to answer. If he asks the taitas, the elders, they may say, well, who are, how can we say that all can practice yaje? Because it could actually lead to more illness rather than healing. And so, the last point that Miguel makes is that it's incredibly important to listen to the traditional medicine people, to those who really hold that traditional knowledge of how it is used in order to avoid malpractice, to avoid its commodification on the market, and again, to avoid what are the negative outcomes of the malpractice of this sacred plant. So both in terms of health, but also in terms of the effects that it has society, as a society. Riccardo, would you like to add anything to that question? Okay, so...
Diana,
sí.
Hemos tenido experiencia. La medicina se toma para buscar sanación, cuando está enfermo. Cuando no está enfermo no se toma la medicina. Eso pasó, vino un europeo, un señor de Europa vino y nos comentaba cuando llega acá al Amazonas. Y nos comenta que allá tienen pues casas de remedio donde hacen sus ceremonias en Europa. Y toman remedio y toman remedio y remedio, pero el señor llegó enfermo y dice, vengo buscando a los taitas para que me curen. Entonces yo le pregunté, ¿y por qué tomas remedio? ¿Por qué tomaba tanto yagé allá en Europa? ¿Por qué no te curaste? Le dije, pues ahí es donde se ve por qué se toma el remedio, qué está pasando, quién es el verdaderamente médico tradicional que verdaderamente sane esas enfermedades. Pero llegó buscando a los médicos tradicionales, que no se curó. Entonces le dije, ahí algo está pasando. ¿Por qué no cura el remedio? ¿De dónde salió ese remedio? Porque pues eso también depende de la calidad del remedio que sale, digamos, porque el remedio después de que sale del territorio ya no es lo mismo. Ya cambia la esencia, cambia el espíritu. Entonces, como tal, la medicina del yagé y siempre va a ser del territorio y siempre será de los pueblos amazónicos.
And Miguel wants to add that in his experience, yagé is not used when one is not sick. It is used explicitly to heal. And when you aren't sick, it can be very problematic. And he gave the example of a man from Europe who came to the territory after having, been a part of a community within his country in Europe, where they participated in various tomas of, drank a lot of yagé, but he wasn't healing. And so eventually he went to look for a taita who could maybe heal him from his illness. And what Miguel is trying to show here is that as many times as this individual had consumed yagé, he had not healed. He really needed to go to a traditional medicine person who understands this plant and understands it to heal. Furthermore, Miguel wanted to know that the quality of the medicine is something to take note of. Once the medicine leaves the territory, it may change its essence, its spiritual component. And so once again, Miguel is making this note how yagé and its uses really can't be abstracted from the context of territory and from the way in which the traveling of this plant shifts its actual properties, components, intentions. So we have 13 minutes left. Let me just see if there's another standout question. Okay, somebody asks, if someone wants to work with Yahé in the States, so I'm assuming the United States, by creating a church, what are things that we can do here to support indigenous groups and also in our own ceremonies to be sustainable and support indigenous groups? Esta es una pregunta de alguien que está hablando desde los Estados Unidos, que pregunta, si queremos trabajar con Yahé aquí en Estados Unidos, creando nuestra propia iglesia, ¿cuáles son algunas de las cosas que podemos hacer para apoyar a los pueblos indígenas y dentro de nuestras propias ceremonias para que sean sustentables y apoyen a los pueblos indígenas?
Adelante, Ricardo.
I believe that Miguel just answered the question. He is presenting a view that affirms, believes that traditional medicine shouldn't be traveling unless there are some very specific circumstances. As an organization, we're not going to specifically criticize an ayahuasca church. We will not do that. We know that they have their own trajectory. We respect it, but we're moving within a different paradigm, which is strengthening our communities to revert to the process of cultural and physical extermination. And so all these dynamics really just complicate our lives in a way. We feel, the Taitas feel that they're losing control is the right word, of a very, very spiritual experience. Yeah. So I can't really answer that question. It's each one with her own conscience and trust, have faith. Hopefully the path will unfold in front of you.
Miguel, quisiera añadir algo ahorita lo que comentó Ricardo, ¿no? Es que de alguna forma ya contestaste esa pregunta con lo que acabas de explicar, pero no sé si hay algo más que quisiera añadir, ¿no? Para estas personas que aún quieren crear círculos o iglesias a base de la medicina sagrada en un territorio que no es tradicionalmente.
Para nosotros el tema ha sido discutido, digamos, a nivel de los territorios de los taitas, de las mujeres sabedoras, donde siempre hemos venido hablando de que la medicina del Yahé tiene que ser de donde tiene que ser, porque así me llegaron unos amigos de los Estados Unidos también, llegaron a la casa y compartimos la medicina y me decían cómo nos organizamos para crear una iglesia en los Estados Unidos o una escuela. Yo le decía en la ceremonia, es momento de reflexionar y pensar cuál es el objetivo de crear una iglesia en una ciudad. Verdaderamente que hay mucha gente que necesita curarse, buscar la sanación, pero el riesgo es muy alto con la espiritualidad, porque como te decía, estamos hablando de una planta espiritual, una planta que tiene espíritu, una planta poderosa, una planta maestra que si no la usamos para hacer el bien, pues con el tiempo vamos a terminar enfermos o totalmente mal, porque pues por eso se dice medicina sagrada. Y como pueblo nosotros Por eso nosotros con la medicina no buscamos otra forma, sino que vivir en paz y en armonía con la madre tierra, donde se comparte la medicina en el territorio, se comparte con los comuneros, pero para tratar enfermedades, y no se trata para más cosas. Eso se...
So, as a response to that question, this is something that his community has discussed many times with the elders, with the healers, really re-emphasizing that this medicine needs to remain anchored to its endemic place. He gives another anecdote of friends from the United States who went to his community to partake and share in Yahe, and we're asking him the same question, right? How could they create a church or a type of school in the United States where they could bring these Yahe ceremonies to the United States? And his response was to really ask them to reflect and think about what their objectives were. What do you get from creating a church in the United States, in a city? How does this wind up being linked to spirituality or to the power of the plant? And again, he goes back to this notion of what is the objective of the use of this medicinal plant that really is a being, right, is a sentient being, has its own power. And what does it mean to be using it not for treating illnesses, but for other purposes? It looks like we only have time for one more question, and I wanted to ask maybe to anchor it a little bit to Riccardo's presentation, if both of you could comment on the way in which ayahuasca or yahe is being used as a tool in conflict transformation in Colombia between armed groups and indigenous communities. If you could comment or possibly expand on this effort. La última pregunta viene siendo la cuestión de cómo se está utilizando el yahe como una forma de transformar el conflicto que han vivido estas comunidades por el conflicto armado. Entonces, si podrían hablar un poquito más de cómo se está utilizando como una herramienta para sanar este conflicto y el trauma.
Voy a compartir un poco, luego Ricardo me ayuda con la pregunta. Pues nosotros, vea que Diana, pues yo no puedo verdaderamente, disculparán, no entiendo inglés, no hablo inglés, pero pienso que, pues, pero sé hablar mi lengua materna. Nosotros no es el conflicto armado nomás, sino que esto es milenario. Esto nosotros hemos pasado más de 500 años de invasión, de colonización, de genocidio, de toda clase de exterminio para los pueblos amazónicos. En el momento de llegar, digamos, a las religiones, a los pueblos indígenas, quisieron apagar con esta medicina sagrada, con la espiritualidad, donde nos trataban brujos y de todo. Quisieron apagar a la espiritualidad de nuestros abuelos, ancestros. Entonces, desde allá ha sido la lucha, incansablemente la lucha y resistencia con la medicina sagrada del yahe. ¿Cómo ha sido? Verdaderamente ahora llegamos al conflicto armado colombiano, donde nosotros hemos sido prácticamente el número uno, los pueblos indígenas referentes del conflicto armado, quienes hemos padecido sin deber alguno, digamos, al Estado colombiano, pero por la política del gobierno nos ha tocado convivir con ese conflicto. Pero para el conflicto nosotros, asimismo, se firmó el tratado de paz, el acuerdo de paz con la guerrilla más antigua de Latinoamérica, con la guerrilla de las FARC. Y los territorios, después de la firma de la paz, siguieron siendo territorios lacerados, territorios desplazados, territorios divididos. sin la escucha del gobierno, totalmente en el abandono, en el olvido del Estado colombiano. Pero como pueblos indígenas también hemos venido buscando estrategias, mecanismos para poder afrontar toda esa situación de desplazamiento, de amenaza. ¿Y cuál ha sido la herramienta primordial para nosotros? Ha sido el camino de la espiritualidad. ¿Y cómo hemos afrontado a estos conflictos? A través de las ceremonias espirituales. ¿Para qué nosotros realizamos ceremonias espirituales en los territorios? Para sanar esa herida que el conflicto armado ha dejado en los territorios. Porque muchos de nuestros compañeros indígenas jóvenes también fueron excombatientes, que fueron invitados a prestar servicio militar, fueron reclutados prácticamente de los diferentes grupos armados, legales e ilegales. Pero nosotros nuevamente han vuelto a los territorios. ¿Y con qué herramientas hemos esperado para que verdaderamente cambien ese pensamiento del conflicto, de la guerra? Hemos, desde nuestros conocimientos, hemos venido implementando en el tema de la salud, en el tema de la sanación corporal, espiritual, mental, individual, de la colectividad. Ha sido a través de esta planta sagrada del Yahé, realizando ceremonias espirituales, donde las abuelas, con la ayuda de las abuelas y abuelos sabios o taitas, hemos venido sanando esas enfermedades. Hemos buscado la sanación de todas esas traumas, de todos esos conflictos que como pueblos nos ha tocado vivir. Y seguimos en esa búsqueda, en esa lucha, en esa resistencia, buscando la sanación para que verdaderamente podamos vivir como pueblos, como hermanos y en esa armonía con el espíritu, digamos, de la Madre Tierra. Eso sería, no sé, Ricardo.
Deja nomás traduzco, por favor. Muchas gracias, Miguel. Miguel wants to start out by saying that it's not just the armed conflict that we have at hand here. This is something that remits to 500 years of invasion, of colonialism, of genocide in the Amazon region. Furthermore, when organized religion penetrated the Amazon, they brought with it this idea to continue to exterminate spiritual practices, to demonize the plants, to demonize the knowledge of the elders, of the taitas. So when the armed conflict comes along, you already have a few centuries of this type of violence penetrating this region. And Miguel would like to say that indigenous people, in many ways, were really the principal victims of this armed conflict, that they didn't even have much say in, right? This was a conflict having to do with parties in government, with elites, right? And indigenous people nonetheless were deeply affected, or were the ones who were mostly affected by the violence. And then once you have the peace accords, what you have in terms of looking at the territory of indigenous peoples is a continuation of ruptured, displaced, trampled, abandoned territories that have not been able to heal, even despite there being a peace accord. So as indigenous peoples, they have looked for strategies in which they can find a way to heal from centuries of violence. And in many ways, it is spirituality and ceremony that has really driven that solution. And so while you still have both legal and illegal actions that are displacing people, what they are trying to do on a local level is finding ways to help change the way local community members understand and live the experience of these traumas. And so Yahé has really, with the help of these taitas, right? So two things, the medicinal plant, the teacher plant, and the taitas are able to heal these illnesses, right? The legacy of these traumas from this very local kind of in place practice. And he wants to mention that they remain in struggle to find an eventual way to live in peace and harmony with Mother Earth. Riccardo, would you like to add briefly anything to this final question?
Yeah, just really briefly. I think Miguel was really exhaustive as usual. Once I asked, I was talking to an elder, to a Taita, regarding peace building and the peace accords. And he said to me, look, Riccardo, the peace accords are very important. We're actively working in the territories through spirituality. But the real peace accords is the one that humanity needs to sign with Mother Earth. It's the interspecies or interspiritual solidarity and reciprocity that we need to incorporate into our conscience. Yeah. Respect towards the other. And that includes animate and inanimate things, tangible and intangible, the rivers, the clouds, the oceans, the plants, and all that chorus of spirituality of which Taitas and women of knowledge are privy. That is what they're still understanding, that communication that is mediated through the sacred plants that very few people on earth are still able to enact. And that understanding, that connection with Mother Earth is the signing of a peace accord with Mother Earth that the elder was referring to. So it's important, yes, let's transcend trauma, we must heal, we must get together at the community level, because that is where it happens, not in the palaces of government. That is where it happens, within the community. But the real task is to create, walk towards the generation of a paradigm where we sign a humanity peace accords with Mother Earth. Mm-hmm. And that is the objective right now. And that is peace.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Riccardo and Miguel. We are now at the end. I'm not sure if Josh and Dia will come back in. But just to kind of cap this off, I mean, just looking at the chat, I think that this is really a call for people to put themselves, even if it's impossible, to try to imagine what communities are having to face, right? This is just one more conflict of so many that they have had to struggle against for centuries now. And so these types of responses that we see really need to be placed into that context. And those who are not in South America, are not in the Amazon, it's a big responsibility to understand where to go from here, especially as we see very clear interest in the commodification, in the commercialization of plant medicines. So thank you so much. Any mistakes in translation? Or mine? Muchas gracias, Miguel. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias, Miguel, Riccardo. Thank you so much, Diana, for translating and offering your wisdom. Thank you all. I'll say goodbye and with a few announcements. But one last thank you. We'll see you soon. All right, that was wonderful. Yeah, a lot of really beautiful stuff there. Thank you all for coming, and just bear with me for a few more minutes. I'm going to offer just a few closing announcements. First, I want to just share some ways for you to find out some more about Miguel and Riccardo's work. I'm going to post the link to the UMIAC website here. You can learn more about the work they're doing there. I also wanted to share that earlier this year, Miguel published an article with us on the Chacruna website called The Guardians of Amazonian Forests in Defense of Life. So I'm going to post the link to that as well. And I also wanted to share that Diana didn't share as much about herself today, but she's involved with some incredible work also. And I encourage you to learn more about her. And she just published an article with us just a few days ago. So I'm going to post the link to that as well. Just a reminder that this event is recorded, and as soon as we close, it'll be available, so you can go back and watch anything you missed. And if you want to check out any of our previous recordings from all of our community forums, they're all available here on Crowdcast. I'm going to post the link to the Chacruna page, so you can watch all our recordings of the community forums there. And then next week we have another community forum. Normally they are on Wednesdays, but this is this one we're actually doing on Friday. So it's going to be next Friday, November 20th. And that's going to be part 4 of the series we've been doing called Empowering Therapists of Color as Psychedelics Go Mainstream. And we're featuring different members from Chacruna's Racial Equity and Access Committee, exploring the intersection of race and psychedelics. And so that's featuring Jamila and Nicole Buchanan from our Racial Equity and Access Committee. You can read more and register here. I'm going to post the link. It's called Black Lives Matter and Psychedelic Integration. What else? We just announced our conference, which is actually very relevant to today's event. It's going to be called Sacred Plants in the Americas 2. It's a follow-up to Plantas Sagradas en las Americas conference that we organized in Mexico a few years ago. And it's really focusing on a lot of these issues that were brought up today, specifically, the consequences of the globalization of plant medicine and how we can offer and practice indigenous reciprocity and support the original peoples that these medicines come from. And so we're featuring many different speakers from throughout the Americas and different indigenous groups. And in conjunction with this conference, we're launching a project called the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative. And it's going to be a really comprehensive resource for people to connect directly with smaller grassroots indigenous-led organizations throughout the Americas. And so you can read more about the conference. Tickets are not on sale yet, but they will be in the next couple weeks. But we do have the webpage up and a few speakers confirmed already, so just a link for that. One more plug for membership. If you want to go to the conference, if you want to keep coming to these events and receive a discount, I definitely encourage you to become a member. There's a lot of different levels that have different discounts and different or free access depending on the tier. And we have discounts for the conference, and then we do monthly member-only smaller events too that are just a really great opportunity to meet the Chacruna team directly, meet other members, and actually interact and connect with one another. And free shirts are another perk for some of the membership tiers. We also have shirts for sale. And just a reminder, the membership link is right there at the bottom of the screen. So please look at that. And we just released a new T-shirt. This is our old one that we've had for a couple months. We have a bunch of different options and styles. I'm going to post the link here. And we released a new one just last week with a new slogan, Decolonize Your Mind. I think that is all I have. Thanks for staying a few minutes late. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you again to Miguel, Riccardo, and Diana for this great event. I hope